Sandy and Nora's podcast.
Hey, Nora.
Hey, Sandy.
Oh my God, it is so beautiful outside today. I spent
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I spent the last 3 hours just running around in the park playing, and I feel so good.
Yeah, it's the same thing here. It's beautiful like that as well. Perhaps unseasonal beautiful. I had a soccer game today and I played in the full sun, so I feel like I was on the beach all day, and I'm dead tired as a result.
I love that.
Yeah. So I can't complain. Yeah, really, really nice, but I feel bagged, majorly bagged.
Did you win?
Yeah, you know what? We did. We beat the team. I'm going to say their name and I totally forgot their name. So Bossville, I think. Very, very, very clever team name in Quebec City.
Congratulations. I love that. I love that for you. Yay. So how are you doing? How's this week? Has the busyness let up a little bit? Are we closer to reading your next book?
Oh, yes. You're a week closer to it. I'm doing super good. And do you know what, Sandy? I had a really interesting meeting with someone this week at Apple Podcasts. And the cool thing about Apple Podcasts is, I mean, like, they pay attention to what the hell's going on in Canada. And so a lot of the changes that I've been mentioning on the Daily News, if you don't listen to the Daily News, I want to make sure that you hear about them on this show, because a lot of the ideas are coming from folks there and from other folks and just general feedback that we're getting from people. And so one of the big changes is we're going to move the Daily News off of this feed. And so that will mean that this will go back to being just Sandy, Nora, once a week, the two of us talking like it had been for a long time. And so that means if you listen to the Daily News, you'll have to subscribe to another feed. We will go through all of that as we do that change, and you will not lose us, I promise you. But yeah, so just have some other ideas, and I don't know. I'm really excited to share them with you all as they unfold, to see what we can do to spread the word of Sandy and Nora. Because I don't know, Sandy, if you've been paying attention to the media right now, but it's bad out there.
It is bad out there. And you know what? A growing Sandy and Nora, ain't nothing wrong with that. And so
no,
I'm excited for that. We'd have 2 shows under the Sandy and Nora umbrella. That's cool. And, you know, you and I have talked about maybe trying to do like a special at some point in the future. And, you know, as an election is coming up in Canada, maybe that's something that folks would be interested in. I don't know. Let us know. If you have ideas for us, or you think that it would be cool to do something additional, or there's something that you see that we could do in our little audio space and semi-video space with Nora on YouTube, let us know and we'll think about it.
Totally. I mean, there's that. There's also like the possibility of doing stuff like, oh, this is something we've been trying to do and we just could not make the schedules match up, but like a crossover show with another very known podcast in Canada that might do a different kind of thing than we do. There are options, folks. And if you have opinions on these options, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah. And you know what makes options really possible is the folks who help make this podcast happen through their donations and through sharing the podcast with their friends and with their colleagues. And so I have a lot of gratitude for those people, Nora. A lot of gratitude.
Oh my God. Yes, we so do. And so this week, especially thanks to everyone who donated for the first time or changed their donation, especially thank you to Josh, Justin, Becky, Duncan, Patricia, and Ashley.
Thank you all so much. And Nora, I just want to say, like, I mean, we're talking about a number of kind of random things this week, but they're all somewhat related. But I want to just mention one thing that somebody told me this week that it's just been on my mind, like this thing that I've already known, but it was just phrased to me in such a wonderful way through this artist that I was talking to, and she's exploring the way that violence and care work hand in hand in her art. And I just was like, the way that she phrased it, the way that she talked about how the way that we want to care for one another, or that we do care for one another, sometimes is violent or necessitates violence. And I just thought, what a thing to really think about, that sort of phrasing of it. And I just wanted to share that with you and our listeners because, I just thought it was a really compelling thought.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you're protecting your family, that's the ultimate care. And sometimes that takes violence. We're so removed from the blood and the guts of life in Canada. And I don't know if you saw this news this past week, but like there's an increase of unclaimed bodies in Canada because people cannot afford funerals. Like people are dying too poor to be able to have their families afford funerals, and families are just not claiming bodies. So there's been a spike in this in Canada in the last year, which it's kind of one of the first things that would go if people don't have any savings, right? That's why for many, many years in Victorian England, there were paupers graves where you would just put mass graves and people together. So it is interesting to think about that combination. And then it's also especially interesting to think about how in Canada, care has often accompanied violence as well in the production of modern Canada. And so, we might point to how wonderful it is that we have public health care or public education, but what was hand in hand in the creation of public health care and public education was creation of white identity, and was the existence of residential schools and Indian hospitals. And so care and violence in Canada have certainly always gone together. And the question is who gets the care, who gives the care, who has access to it, and who doesn't. And as we see people being priced out of existence in this country, that balance between violence and care is going to really continue to grow away from one another, where people are going to be forced to experience state violence far more than they're able to experience care from the state.
Yeah, there's so many ways that violence is constructed in our world, and violence is also deeply related to power. And so, there's ways that the expression of violence can be because of an abuse of power, and that could be individual, it could be on a state level, and there's ways that violence can be an expression of care, and that's like I think that's a less developed sort of cultural understanding that we have. I think we know it innately, but we don't know it. I think it's why a lot of people struggle with how to reckon with October 7th. Some people do, some people do not, if it is part of your history that struggle includes violence, that's something that perhaps you have less of an issue with. And maybe, this is one of the things we want to talk about this week, and maybe who you are and your identity helps you understand that. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. There are a couple of things that we should mention before we move on. We're recording this on Sunday. And on Sunday, we have heard that there is this... the top news right now is that the president of Iran's helicopter has gone down. It has crashed, and that people, so far as I know right now, don't know what his status is. And so I'm sure we'll hear more over the next couple of days before this episode is published. But if you're wondering why we don't have anything definitive when there are more definitive things that are out in the world by the time you're listening to this, that's why.
Mm-hmm. I will note, though, what will likely continue to be the case on Tuesday and going forward after that is how Canadian politicians react to this. To see who is celebrating the death of Iranian officials. Already, we've seen some of that. Some conservatives have been celebrating his likely death. I mean, as Sandy says, we don't know, but he's been missing for 12 hours. Everybody in the helicopter, they haven't been able to locate it, and the footage is pretty harrowing. I mean, it's foggy like crazy, so it's really hard to find where this helicopter is, and just to see in a moment like this, where Iran is an important country, it's a de facto enemy of Canada. And we treat Iran like an enemy in a whole bunch of different structural ways. And for me, I'm closest to watching like how Canada treats Iranian students and their visas and that whole kind of mess. Because Canada does not treat Iranian students very well, international students who come to study in Canada. But this is a moment where it actually has a huge impact on geopolitics, on how people react to what is going on, and especially considering Iran and Israel's relationship and Israel's actions right now in Gaza. So pay really close attention to how people react to this. And my prediction on Tuesday and going forward is that our leaders in Canada will react like children. They will say simple things. They will say things that are probably not totally right. I'm thinking specifically about Polyever. I can't imagine what the NDP is going to squeak out. And you can really see the lack of depth that exists within our leadership in Canada to wrap their heads around something like this and the impact that's going to have on geopolitics, regardless of why or how or whatever happened. So there's my prediction. Another moment of exposing our leaders for being what they are, which is shallow hacks.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I didn't think I was going to mention, but now I feel like I really need to, because we actually briefly spoke about this last week, Nora, after we stopped recording. Remember last week after we stopped recording, when we started talking about this movement online to block celebrities who hadn't talked about Palestine?
Yeah, I think you were telling me about it because I'm so aloof to celebrity culture that I hadn't noticed this thing.
Right. And so, there's this idea that's been online that, that was going viral a little bit, that people should block celebrities or stop following them if they hadn't said anything about Palestine, as a way to, I'm not sure, raise awareness, encourage people to, part of the reason Nora and I were talking about it was because we were like, it's so frustrating when, this energy goes into stuff that doesn't really make that much of a difference and is kind of useless. You could see the like follower count falling for like the Kardashians or someone. Like, people have made videos of the follower counts falling, but it's like, okay, so instead of 6,450,000, it's 6,325,000. It's like, okay, all right. And it's, just the way that social media kind of like tricks us into thinking that certain things that we do is impactful in a bigger way when it's not. And Nora, you responded by saying, well, yeah, that's what the Me Too movement kind of was. And it's like, yeah, there was no energy that was going into like an actual power shift. And then that brings me to the thing that I didn't think I was going to raise, which is that this pop culture moment of Sean P. Diddy Combs being found to have brutalized his ex-girlfriend Cassie, and I raise that because, one, it's like again another tell of like what the Me Too movement didn't do. It was supposed to be, targeting really powerful men who were engaging in gender-based violence and using their power to enact violence, not in a care way, but to in fact enact violence in a gendered way, but also because of his interesting response that happened today. So Cassie had responded by filing a lawsuit, which was settled, and that he said was just an attempt to get some money, and that this sort of thing happens all the time. And then a video came out showing him very obviously brutalizing this woman. And then he puts out a statement. And Nora, it's just so fascinating where we are, I think, in 2024 versus where we used to be, where there are just, we've spoken on this podcast before, there are these cultural scripts that we have that we know work well for social media, for the public or whatever. And so he gets on his social media and he says, I take full responsibility. I look at that and I am disgusted. I want to be I want to be held accountable for this. I am not asking for forgiveness. I was at the lowest point of my life, and that is like not an excuse, but I feel disgusted watching that man, and I am disgusted about that. And I want everybody to know that I take full responsibility and I want to be held accountable. And, you know, I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm really thinking about this. Isn't that
Wow.
like amazing? Amazing that what we have done, what have we done in that, in the movement that was created for Me Too? You know, and I'm not saying that it was altogether nothing. I don't think that that's true. I'm just looking back and thinking like, what could we have done versus what we actually did? I think that we gave a lot of scripts to people like, how do you sound? How do you come out of something? And what do you need to say to give yourself a man who has violently abused your power? What do you need to say to give yourself the best shot of getting out of this, and still being able to have the place in the world that you had before?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, part of it is that that Me Too is so individualized that it never was able to zoom out and look at power relations beyond perhaps two individuals. I mean, in some cases it did zoom out a little bit further, but you know, the whole idea that we are calling out or stating some sort of experience that we've had that has been violent, I mean, that's all good. That's fine. But it's not a starting place to build structural change when we know that what we're fighting against is a machine that will absorb those scripts and spit out the response. That does make the most sense. You know, considering that Me Too kind of took the internet by storm in 2017, this video is from 2016. You know, how many celebrities avoided being denounced, or, you know, the moment that Me Too happened allowed for people to be believed in a way that hadn't and since doesn't really exist. So that was really important. But, you know, like we, and I'm going to blame the internet on this. Like, we see this stuff as completely black and white. And it's like, on one hand, you know, there's no way to redeem yourself. If you're an abusive individual and you've done violence to someone, there's just simply no way, because it's the lowest of the low and whatever. And so that's where you get a response like, I can't even be forgiven, right? Which is like actually not how society works. That there is forgiveness, there are reparations, there is punishment, there is ways to deal with this stuff. And that's often, you know, within a community of people that, you know, whether it's two people that had some sort of relationship with one another, or whether it's strangers but operating within a community, like that's kind of between those groups of people and the legal system. When you have to stand back and say, wait, like how actually do we create systems that don't allow for the violence to happen? Well, when it comes to something like Me Too, like that's patriarchy. And that's literally undoing the patriarchy, which is a level of systemic change that no internet campaign, no Alyssa Milano fucking led campaign is going to be able to do. And by marginalizing us to be online primarily and speaking out and raising awareness and getting rid of stigma and all these fucking buzzwords, of course, we're left with almost nothing, however many years later. I mean, I don't want to do the math, but like that's, I guess, 8 years, right? So, I mean, wow. Is that 8 years? No. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah. It's 8 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, like the video is shocking. And the other thing too, is it's like the internet's so shitty where it's like, you want to say something about this and, you know, you're still then retweeting someone's assault over and over and over. I think I must have seen it 20 times and it's just like, fuck, like I don't have to see this. Like, I get it. No. I believe like anybody's going to say that that Sean Combs is doing shitty stuff. I'm like, yeah, okay, I believe that. So yeah, it is useless. And on the blocking of celebrities, one other thing that I think is really important for people to realize is like celebrities are a litmus test. Celebrities are not leading the fucking charge for change. They're a litmus test. And you can judge how your messaging might be working or not working based on how many celebrities think it is in their interest to jump onto it. And so you can get mad that Taylor Swift hasn't fucking said anything. I don't even know if she has or not. I don't care about Taylor Swift. But like, if she were to be like Free Palestine, that would still not be like, woo, Taylor Swift is awesome. I'm going to listen to her music. I'm not going to listen to her fucking music. I'm not interested in Taylor Swift. And that would be a litmus test of where we are. That is not Taylor Swift is fucking leading the fucking Palestinian movement.
No, it means like her entire team has done some looking into like what the risk is of her saying
some
anything.
Polling.
So, yeah, exactly. It's like it's pop culture is a mirror to us of what like how we're doing, and that can be helpful sometimes, and sometimes it's not. And this week, pop culture said, "The King of the United Kingdom is the devil himself."
But his son is the hottest man in England.
What? I didn't get that part.
Yeah, he was voted like the most attractive man in the fucking British Empire or whatever the fuck they decided.
King Charles's son? Which one?
The older one.
Prince William?
Yeah, is that him? Yeah. No, it's amazing. And it accompanies a picture where he's like objectively not hot. So it's just like, whatever, man. The Brits are
obviously not.
No, I know. But like not even a good picture of him.
Oh, I'm very confused about this, but okay, yeah. I was just trying to make a joke about the terrible official portrait of King Charles, but
it's amazing.
Yeah,
it's so amazing.
Great.
Now,
Anyway.
I want to just mention one thing before we get into kind of like the meat of the discussion, though. If you've got other stuff to raise, for sure do that. It's related to this. So there's a story from Sarah Smelly from the Canadian Press. And it reports that a medical worker who was fleeing Gaza was asked if they worked on any Hamas members. And if they did not work on, I mean, that's the language in the article, how they managed to avoid working on Hamas members. Now, the article from the Canadian Press is full of lawyers being like, what in the fuck? This is so outrageously inappropriate, and then all of the problems with the system of actually like granting people passage to Canada and how Canada has failed and blah blah blah. But it's like, how low are we like going in this country in terms of our support for Israel and our refusal to accept that the Palestinians in this situation are the ones who are under attack?
Wow. I mean, as you raise that, how low are we going in this country? Have you seen, well, I know that you must have seen the article in The Breach that talks about, it's a whistleblower article where Molly Schumann talks about her experience working at the CBC and how the CBC, working at CBC News, they were very, very specific about making sure that, for example, people didn't say the word Palestine, that people weren't talking about genocide, even though the United Nations has at this point talked about genocide, and how Palestinian guests were being canceled from being on CBC News to talk about what was happening in Gaza. And I mean, it's a pretty stunning first-hand report of what it has been like to work at our public broadcaster in this time. Like, what in the fuck?
Yeah, what stood out for me the most was the refusal by so many people within Schumann's world. So whether it was producers or like fellow producers or people who are above her, and she says that she was a producer at the CBC, how they were so afraid of having live interviews. So in addition to canceling guests or not bringing on Palestinian guests, there was also this push to have the pre-recorded interviews so that they could be, screened and that people wouldn't speak out of line. It is like, live television and live radio is the beating heart of media. As much as I love podcasting, I would throw all of this away if Sandy and I could do like a live like radio show across Canada or a live television show, because there's a magic to live television and radio where you hear people stumble, things can't get cut out, there's emotion, there's awkward pauses, there's a way to that feels so much better. And we've been really like conditioned to like these overly cut videos that like just proliferate everywhere online, where, you know, someone's cutting their sentences like in video that's very choppy so that it comes across as being very clear and concise, but all of the other words that are in between are all removed. Like there's a place for that, but live television is really, really important as well. And to not have the confidence in a guest that they will not step out of line on live television, for me is like the fucking alarm that the CBC is totally on fire and like the upper structure has fallen over.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen this incredible live interview that happened in the United Kingdom this week, where a former politician, I can't remember her name, goes onto campus, not at Cambridge, I don't think. I think it was another campus, to talk to some of the students who were doing an encampment, and they later had that student come onto their show. And this is a Tory politician, very conservative, and who was attempting to, I don't know, make the students look bad, who all just like refused to talk to her. And then so they do this live interview with one of the students afterwards, who, she sets up the interview to say to her, what is your conception of October 7th? And the student in this, again, incredible live interview is like, I don't even know why you would start with October 7th. I think that's disingenuous, but it does, comport with the way that you've conducted yourself. You truly embarrassed yourself coming to a student encampment in the way that you did, when what we're trying to do is, and then the student herself was able to confront this former politician and say, like, actually, fuck you. And this is what people should hear. This is how people should be responding to the outrageous way that you are trying to propagandize what is happening. And I'm going to respond to you with the amount of vitriol that you deserve, and pointing out the indignity in what you are saying, and making it really fucking clear that anyone who is engaging in the way that you are is doing it under false pretenses and is propagandizing and is not engaging with what is happening in Gaza, with this genocide, with the seriousness that it deserves, and with the level of fucking humanity to understand how humans respond to one another, or should respond to one another in times of great crisis together. Like, fuck, it was such... did you see the interview that I'm talking about? Do you know what I'm referring to?
No.
Yeah, I think the student's name is Fiona Lawley, and she is confronting Suella Braverman, who is the former Home Secretary. It's an incredible interview. If you want to go watch what we can never see in Canada.
But isn't that stunning that the public broadcaster is so afraid of the opinions of average people that they actually can't be on the air? Like, from a journalism perspective, that is unfucking believable, because this is the thing about what is happening right now. Like, there is, I think about an interview, and I actually wrote about this on my Substack. So if you really want to find the interview or see what I wrote about it, you can find it. It was early on in this genocide, and it was on Tout le monde en parle, which is the only television show in Canada that allows guests to just freely talk about stuff. And they interview a lot of different kinds of people. It's Canada's most popular television show. And of course, it's in French. So, most of you probably don't watch Tout le monde en parle. But they had this segment that featured Boufelja Ben Abdallah, who is the spokesperson for the Islamic Cultural Center in Quebec City and a friend of mine. And beside him, they had Richard Marceau, who is the head of legal affairs for CIJA, the Canada-Israel Jewish Affairs Committee or whatever. And these two men have completely different opinions on everything. And at that point, I think, it was maybe the first 6 weeks after October 7th. And for them to be interacting with one another freely, not being edited by Radio-Canada, and talking about their opinions on what was going on, it's actually so important to see, because people, they're being human to one another, as we all are when we're talking about things with people that we disagree with. They were being human. They were acting out their disagreement. They were explaining why they thought they were correct. I think that Boufelja totally demonstrated in a far superior manner why we should be concerned about mass murder in Gaza. And the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and we should not just signal out CBC, because it's not like it's just CBC. All Canadian media are just as fucking cowardly. Like they are allergic to having people freely speak on the air. And I have direct experience with this. Like up until 2024, I was part of this thing on Sunday morning called The Conversation, and Sunday morning television is not the highest rated time for people to be watching TV. So it was a moment where they were able to get away with these interviews with average Canadians on any matter of subject. And after October 7th, it was really clear that they were struggling with the topics that we were allowed to talk about, because it was always like a topic was picked in advance and you do the pre-interview and then they're live on live television. And they killed the entire segment despite the fact that it was extremely popular and the ratings were great. And I am sure, having read Schumann's article, that this is probably this was canceled because they knew that they couldn't not talk about Gaza. And not only that, they probably wouldn't have found anyone to defend what Israel was doing, because guess where public opinion is? We're fucking in the 80 percentile in Canada of people that, or the 80 percentages of people in Canada that don't support what Israel's doing. Probably even fucking higher, actually. So it's really toxic, poisonous, ending the existence of the CBC, I think. And it's a transformation of Canadian media before our eyes to be the most bland and boring and curated and not representative fucking shit possible, which, by the way, no one wants to listen to.
Yeah, and of course I also have direct experience with this, having had a pre-interview once where I was like, yeah, we should defund the police, they shouldn't exist, and that being like, oh, you said what now? And then having my segment canceled. But in any case, yeah, it's really fucking sad that, we can't, I don't know, have real fucking conversation in Canadian media in this fucking country. The other thing that we wanted to talk about a little bit this week is a little bit about identity politics, or the politics of identity, and how that is related to what is happening in Gaza, to how people have been discussing some of how folks are responding to this. There's this attempt, I think, to dismiss how people respond to a genocide happening in our world by saying, well, just because you're this identity doesn't mean you have to express this notion or feel this way about something. And then it's like, huh? I'm certainly experiencing that as someone who's Black. And then I've also seen some weird sort of manipulations of maybe something that folks have heard in the way that identity politics is discussed or used, by saying, well, as it'll be a Zionist person who will perhaps say, well, as a Jewish person, I'm the minority and I am an expert in this, and you should be listening to me on this particular topic, which is like a massive misunderstanding of how identity, of the politics of identity. And it's just like another example of the way that something that will be really useful, that has been like percolated in the academy for a really long time, will get into the zeitgeist through pop culture or social media or what have you, and become fully bastardized, and does not it's like a whisper of what it once was. And it's used in ways that really, in the end, just serve to discount what it is giving to us as a concept. And so we kind of want to talk a little bit about identity politics and where it can be, how it can be misused, and how to recognize that, and, how to think about identity politics in today's world.
Yeah, it seems to me that this is a message that has risen as the popularity for Palestinians in Gaza is undeniable. And so one of the first times that I was really seeing this was around criticism of Sarah Jama. So Sarah Jama, the member of provincial parliament in Ontario, who was kicked out for wearing keffiyeh, I saw people say, she's not even Palestinian. Like, this is bullshit. She's not even Palestinian. And then I saw people respond and say, well, her husband's Palestinian, so this matters really a lot to her. And it's like, yeah, for sure. But also, like, who cares? Like, this is, like, Israel has worked so hard, so very hard to position itself as being the nation for Jewish people around the world. And if you're Jewish, you have to support Israel. Like, that has literally been the PR push for decades of how to get support for this colonial project from people outside of Israel. And it worked to some extent. It doesn't totally work. I mean, of course, there's anti-Zionist Jews, and they've been a lot of anti-Zionist Jewish organizations have been really on the forefront of this struggle, which has been really, really great. But, when it's thrown back to say, like, because of your identity, you should or you should not believe certain things, is just such a shortcut. It's such a cop-out. It's so boring of an argument, because it's like, can we have some fucking analysis here? Like, I literally saw someone saying, like, well, a decade ago, if you tried to wear a keffiyeh and you weren't Palestinian, you would have been accused of cultural appropriation, which is like, I'm wearing a keffiyeh for 12 years. I can tell you that not a single person has ever said that to me. I could not be more white. And no one is like, what the fuck? You're appropriating culture, right? Like, there's solidarity, and we act our solidarity out, and acting out solidarity is happening in towns and cities all across Canada and the world. And if this is the smear, if using the politics of identity is the smear to try and convince someone to say, oh, wait, maybe I shouldn't take a position on this because maybe this isn't my place. I mean, I don't imagine it's going to work on a single person, really.
No, of course not. And it's just like, I mean, let's be really clear about what the politics or identity is. It's like a way of understanding the world. It helps us to understand certain things about, like, for example, migration. Like, why is it that, Canada was really, really open to migration for people from all over Europe? It was really, really open to making sure that there was space for refugees from certain countries, but isn't as open to making sure that there's space for refugees from other countries. Like, the politics of identity helps us to understand that. It's not the only thing that helps us to understand those things, but it certainly does. It's a huge piece of the puzzle. It's also a valuable form of knowledge, is like who we are in the world gives us a certain type of knowledge. Like, there's this, if you are a gender minority, there's a certain type of knowledge that you have about our world and how it is structured vis-a-vis gender, that you have that knowledge because of how you have to move through and navigate the world in a way that someone who is a white man a white cis man just wouldn't have that same knowledge. It's not the only knowledge that's important, but it's an important piece of knowledge. There's all sorts of knowledges that are available to us in our world. And for so long, the knowledges that we have because of who we are, especially for marginalized people, was dismissed. And that's why I think in the last 15, 20 years, it's been, such a huge boon that we've been able to kind of throw that off and say, no, like, this is what I know as a result of being a Black woman. This is what I know as a result of being who I am. it is not the only knowledge, and it should not be used. Like I see a lot of conservative right-wing people who take that to like its absurdity. Like you're the only person who can speak on an issue because you're a Black woman. No, that's not what that means. It just means that I have a certain type of knowledge. Someone who has my identity and has also done a lot of study, or someone who doesn't have my identity and has done a lot of study, also has another type of knowledge. The knowledge that we gain from popular culture, that's another type of knowledge. It may not be most applicable for all situations, just like any knowledge is. It's just a way of understanding the world that we should recognize and respect. And for a very long time, it was not recognized or respected. And of course, like, this is a backlash period for so many progressive movements. That's one of the things that we're seeing now. And so when you hear people talk about what is happening, like, don't disbelieve like what you know is happening. It's genocide. And if they discount someone because of their identity, like, fuck you, okay? That is a trope. It's a racist trope, and it's one that does not deserve attention or respect. And people should understand that that's what's going on. There's value in the politics of identity. And when people are trying to make it seem as though it's absurd, it's because it is threatening to an order that wants to discount certain types of knowledge that is a risk to the status quo.
Well, and to bring it back to Canadian media, it's also a way to try and to try to continue to marginalize knowledges that are not the quintessential understanding of bias-free information in this country that can only be delivered by a white man or Rosemary Barton. I mean, it's like they're like to trade in this kind of understanding of the world is to say to everybody who's not white, you only believe that because you aren't white. And the actual truth is coming through, sorry guys, us white people. And if you haven't had a chance, Brody Fenlon, who's I think the head of news for CBC English Service, he wrote an article responding to this piece in The Breach. And it actually is a really good example of this conversation, because he posits himself and posits the corporation as being very, very balanced, very fair in the middle of the discussion, right down exactly in the sweet spot between both sides. And you cannot accuse the CBC of bias. Yeah. And it's like literally the only thing that a white person could write. Like there's a reason why it's coming from him. And so that's exactly right. Like as the lies that underpin supporting Israel become more and more untenable, and more people see it and understand what is happening in terms of constructing a narrative that is impossible, a narrative that is unbelievable because we can see what is happening. And we have so many ways of verifying what is true based on our own ability to research and see and think and experience and talk to people and whatever. And so this is the last bastion that white supremacy, that Zionism has, is to just discount everyone's opinion who isn't white. And then if they're anti-Zionist white people, well, they're idiots, so don't listen to them either.